The Willowbrook Community Pool had always been Marcus Chen's sanctuary. As the head lifeguard and pool manager for the past 7 years, he'd seen it all: rowdy teenagers, overprotective parents, and the occasional medical emergency. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what was about to unfold on this sweltering Tuesday afternoon in late July. The temperature had climbed to a brutal 98 degrees, and the pool deck shimmered with heat waves that made everything look like a mirage. Children's laughter echoed across the water as they splashed in the shallow end, while their parents sought refuge under the limited shade of striped umbrellas. The familiar scent of chlorine mixed with sunscreen created that distinctive summer atmosphere that Marcus had grown to love. It was 2:47 p.m. when Marcus first noticed her, a woman in her mid-40s with platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, marching through the pool gates with the determination of a general heading into battle. She wore a crisp white tennis outfit that somehow remained pristine despite the oppressive heat, and her oversized designer sunglasses reflected the pool's surface like twin mirrors. Karen Whitmore, though Marcus didn't know her name yet, surveyed the scene with the calculating gaze of someone who had made a career out of finding fault. Her lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval as she took in the crowded pool, the children's excited screams, and what she perceived as complete chaos masquerading as family fun. Marcus was busy adjusting the pool's chemical levels when he heard the first complaint. It started as a low murmur near the concession stand, where Karen had cornered Janet, the teenage cashier who was working her first summer job. "Excuse me, but this is absolutely unacceptable." Karen's voice carried across the pool deck with the authority of someone who had never been told no. "I specifically called this morning and was assured that lap swimming would be available between 2:30 and 4 p.m. Yet here I am, and the pool is completely overrun with children." Janet, barely 16 and already wilting under Karen's intense stare, stammered her response. Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion. Tuesday afternoons are always open swim for families. Lap swimming is early mornings and evenings. Don't you dare tell me I'm confused." Karen's voice rose an octave, causing several nearby parents to look up from their conversations. "I have been a member of this community for 12 years, and I pay significant property taxes that help fund this facility. I demand to speak to whoever is in charge immediately." Marcus sighed and set down his testing kit. He'd dealt with entitled community members before, but something about this woman's aggressive posture told him this wouldn't be a simple misunderstanding to clear up. He approached with the diplomatic smile he'd perfected over years of customer service. "Good afternoon. Ma'am, I'm Marcus Chen, the pool manager. I understand there's some confusion about our schedule." He kept his voice calm and professional, extending his hand in greeting. Karen ignored the gesture entirely. "Mr. Chen, I am Karen Whitmore from 1247 Maple Ridge Drive, and I am absolutely appalled by the mismanagement of this facility. I was promised lap swimming availability, and instead, I find this mayhem." She gestured dramatically at the pool where children were playing Marco Polo, their joyful shouts echoing off the water. "Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize for any confusion, but our posted schedule clearly shows that Tuesday afternoons from 1 to 5 p.m. are designated for open family swim. Adult lap swimming is available from 6 to 8 a.m. and again from 7 to 9 p.m. Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, though he could feel his patience being tested. "That's completely unacceptable." Karen's voice had now reached a volume that caused every conversation around the pool to stop. Parents pulled their children closer, sensing the tension in the air. "I specifically arranged my entire day around this appointment, and I will not be dismissed by some minimum wage pool boy who clearly doesn't understand the caliber of resident he's dealing with." Marcus felt his jaw tighten at the insult, but years of experience had taught him to remain calm in the face of unreasonable behavior. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but I need to ask you to lower your voice. You're disturbing the other families trying to enjoy their afternoon." This was apparently the wrong thing to say. Karen's face flushed red beneath her carefully applied makeup, and she took a step closer to Marcus, her finger pointed accusingly at his chest. "How dare You police my tone. I am a tax-paying citizen with every right to voice my concerns about this poorly run establishment. These people, she gestured wildly at the families around the pool, have turned this place into a public circus. This used to be a respectable facility before it was overrun by people who don't belong here. The racial undertones in her comment weren't lost on Marcus, whose own family had immigrated from Taiwan when he was 5 years old. Several of the families she was gesturing toward were Hispanic and black, and the implication was crystal clear. Marcus felt a familiar knot form in his stomach, the same feeling he'd experienced countless times growing up when people questioned his right to belong in spaces they considered theirs. Mrs. Whitmore, this is a community pool open to all residents. I'm going to have to ask you to either calm down or leave the premises. Marcus's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath his polite words. Leave? Karen shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that could shatter glass. I will do no such thing. This is my community pool, funded by my tax dollars, and I will not be bullied by some foreign... That's enough. Marcus cut her off, his professional mask finally slipping. You need to leave now, or I'll be forced to call security. But Karen was beyond reason now. The heat, her bruised ego, and what she perceived as a challenge to her authority had pushed her past any semblance of rational behavior. She began pacing back and forth like a caged animal, her voice rising to operatic levels. This is discrimination. This is a violation of my rights as a resident. I pay more in property taxes than most of these people make in a year, and I will not be treated like some common troublemaker. The pool area had gone completely silent except for Karen's ranting. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed at the spectacle. Even the usually boisterous teenagers had stopped their games to watch the unfolding drama. Marcus realized that this situation was spiraling beyond his ability to control. Ma'am, I'm calling the police, he said firmly, pulling out his cell phone. This announcement seemed to trigger something primal in Karen. Her eyes went wild, and she began gesticulating even more frantically. The police? You're calling the police on me? I am the victim here. This is harassment. This is assault. As Marcus dialed 911, Karen continued her tirade, now addressing the crowd of onlookers as if they were her personal jury. You're all witnesses to this outrageous treatment. This man is denying me my rights as a community member. He's discriminating against me because I dared to complain about the chaos in this facility. Several parents began filming with their phones, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The footage would later go viral, but in that moment, Marcus was focused on managing a situation that seemed to be escalating by the second. 911, what's your emergency? Came the calm voice of the dispatcher. This is Marcus Chen at the Willowbrook Community Pool. I have a highly agitated individual who's disturbing the peace and refusing to leave the premises. She's making threatening gestures and using discriminatory language. I need officers to respond. As Marcus gave the dispatcher the details, Karen's voice reached new heights of indignation. She had now appointed herself the spokesperson for what she called decent, hard-working Americans, and was delivering an impromptu speech about the decline of community standards. This is what's wrong with America today, she declared, throwing her arms wide. Hard-working, tax-paying citizens are being pushed aside to accommodate people who don't respect our values, our traditions, our way of life. Marcus ended his call with dispatch and approached Karen one more time, hoping to de-escalate before the police arrived. Mrs. Whitmore, the officers are on their way. I strongly suggest you use this time to calm down and reconsider your behavior. But Karen was in full performance mode now, feeding off the attention and the adrenaline of her own outrage. She had convinced herself that she was fighting some great injustice, and no amount of reason was going to penetrate that delusion. I will not calm down. I will not be silenced. This community will hear about the disgraceful treatment I've received. Here today. She turned to the crowd of onlookers, many of whom were still recording. You're all witnesses to this travesty of justice. In the distance, Marcus could hear the wail of sirens approaching. The sound seemed to energize Karen even further, as if the arrival of law enforcement validated her belief that she was indeed the victim of some great conspiracy. What neither Marcus nor anyone else at the pool could have predicted was that Karen's meltdown was about to reveal secrets that would shake the entire Willowbrook community to its core. The approaching sirens weren't just responding to a disturbance call, they were about to uncover a web of deception that had been years in the making. As the police cars pulled into the parking lot, their red and blue lights reflecting off the pool's surface. Officer Sarah Martinez had been patrolling Willowbrook for 8 years, and she thought she'd seen every type of domestic disturbance imaginable. As she stepped out of her patrol car, her partner, Officer James Thompson, close behind, she expected to find the usual scenario, an upset resident making a mountain out of a molehill. The 911 call had mentioned a disruptive individual at the community pool, probably someone angry about pool rules or overcrowding. What she didn't expect was to recognize the woman at the center of the chaos. Karen Whitmore stood in the middle of the pool deck like a hurricane made flesh, her arms flailing as she continued her tirade to anyone within earshot. Her perfectly styled hair had begun to come loose from its ponytail, and perspiration had started to streak her makeup, despite the expensive setting powder she'd applied that morning. "Officers! Thank God you're here!" Karen rushed toward them, her voice dripping with false relief. "This man," she pointed dramatically at Marcus, "has been harassing me simply because I dared to voice legitimate concerns about the management of this facility." Officer Martinez's hand instinctively moved toward her radio as a chill ran down her spine. She recognized that voice, not from any previous police calls, but from somewhere much more personal and infinitely more painful. "Ma'am, I need you to step back and calm down so we can sort this out," Officer Thompson said, positioning himself between Karen and Marcus while pulling out his notebook. He was younger than Martinez, only 2 years on the force, and he approached the situation with the methodical precision of someone still following protocol to the letter. But Martinez couldn't move. She stood frozen, staring at Karen's face, as memories she'd buried for 15 years came flooding back. The woman's features were older now, enhanced by expensive cosmetic procedures, but there was no mistaking those cold blue eyes or that imperious expression that seemed to look down on everyone around her. "Karen Morrison," Martinez whispered, the name escaping her lips before she could stop it. Karen's head snapped toward Martinez, and for the first time since her arrival at the pool, she fell completely silent. The color drained from her face. As she stared at the uniformed officer, recognition dawning in her eyes like a terrible sunrise. I don't know what you're talking about," Karen stammered, but her voice had lost all its previous authority. She took an involuntary step backward, her hand moving protectively to the designer handbag clutched against her side. "Karen Morrison from Phoenix," Martinez continued, her voice gaining strength as the pieces fell into place. "You've been missing for 16 years. There's still an active warrant for your arrest." The crowd of pool-goers, who had been gradually returning to their activities, suddenly focused their full attention on the unfolding drama. Parents pulled their children closer, sensing that this was no longer just about pool access or community rules. This was something much bigger and far more dangerous. Marcus looked between the two women, confusion written across his face. "Officer, I don't understand. This woman said her name was Karen Whitmore. She claims to live at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive." "There is no 1247 Maple Ridge Drive," Martinez said, never taking her eyes off Karen. "The street only goes up to 1100. She reached for her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 247. I need you to run a wants and warrants check on Karen Elizabeth Morrison, DOB, November 15th, 1978. Karen's composure finally cracked completely. The mask of entitled suburban housewife fell away, revealing something desperate and cornered underneath. "Sarah, please," she said, using Martinez's first name with the familiarity of shared history. "You don't understand. I had to disappear. I had no choice." Officer Thompson looked at his partner with growing concern. "Martinez, do you know this woman?" Sarah Martinez took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to reveal. "Karen Morrison was my sister-in-law. She was married to my brother David until she vanished in 2009, taking with her $200,000 from their joint business account and leaving behind a 4-year-old daughter." The gasp that went up from the crowd was audible. Several people who had been recording the incident fumbled with their phones, realizing they were now documenting something far more serious than a public meltdown. "That's not true!" Karen shrieked, her voice cracking with panic. "Sarah, you know that's not how it happened. He was going to what, Karen?" Martinez stepped closer, her professional training warring with personal emotions that she'd kept buried for over a decade. "Going to report you to the FBI for embezzling money from your client's trust funds? Going to expose your illegal gambling debts? Or going to seek full custody of Emma when he found out about your addiction?" At the mention of Emma's name, Karen broke down completely. All the fight went out of her, and she sank onto one of the pool chairs as if her legs could no longer support her weight. "How is she?" she whispered. "How is my daughter?" Martinez felt her throat tighten. "She's 19 now. She doesn't even remember you. David raised her to believe you were dead because it was easier than explaining why her mother chose money over her own child." The pool area had gone completely silent, except for the gentle lapping of water against the pool's edge. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, their games forgotten as they watched the adults grapple with secrets and pain that stretched back years. Officer Thompson was frantically taking notes, trying to process the revelation that a routine disturbance call had turned into the capture of a long-missing fugitive. His radio crackled to life as dispatch confirmed what Martinez already knew. "Unit 247, we have multiple active warrants for Karen Elizabeth Morrison. Grand theft, embezzlement, fraud, and child abandonment. Approach with caution. Subject may be armed and dangerous." Armed? Marcus stepped back involuntarily, suddenly seeing the situation in a completely new light. Karen's hand moved to her purse again, but this time Martinez was ready. "Karen, I need you to slowly place your hands where I can see them and step away from the bag." "I'm not armed," Karen said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not that person anymore, Sarah. I've changed. I've been trying to make a better life." "By stealing someone else's identity?" Martinez pulled out her handcuffs, her training overriding the complicated emotions swirling in her chest. "By pretending to be someone you're not and terrorizing innocent people at a community pool?" As Martinez approached to make the arrest, Karen suddenly stood up, a wild desperation in her eyes. "You don't understand. I came back to find Emma. I've been living in this community for 3 months, trying to work up the courage to contact David, to see my daughter." "You've been here for 3 months?" Martinez stopped, processing this new information. "Where have you been living? How have you been supporting yourself?" Karen's silence was answer enough. Martinez's eyes widened as she realized the implications. "The house on Maple Ridge. You've been squatting in the Hendersons' place while they're overseas." "I wasn't hurting anyone," Karen protested. "The house was empty. I just needed somewhere to stay while I figured out how to approach my family. The Hendersons reported thousands of dollars in missing jewelry and electronics," Officer Thompson interjected, checking his notes from previous cases. "We've been investigating those burglaries for weeks." The weight of Karen's crimes seemed to multiply by the minute. What had started as a simple noise complaint at a community pool had unraveled a complex web of identity theft, burglary, and a 16-year-old manhunt. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. So all of this, the screaming about pool access, the racist comments, the demands for special treatment, that was all just a cover? "No," Martinez said grimly, cuffing Karen's hands behind her back. "I think that was the real Karen Morrison coming out. The entitled, manipulative person who thought the world owed her everything. The person who could abandon her own child when things got difficult." As Martinez read Karen her rights, the fugitive mother began to sob. Not the performative tears she'd used earlier to try to gain sympathy, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from 16 years of accumulated guilt and regret. "I never meant for it to go this far," she choked out, between sobs. "I just wanted to see Emma. I wanted to tell her I was sorry. I wanted to explain why I had to leave." You didn't have to leave, Martinez said, her voice hard with years of suppressed anger. You chose to steal money and run rather than face the consequences of your actions. You chose your addiction and your debts over your daughter. As they walked Karen toward the patrol car, she turned back toward the pool one last time. The families who had been enjoying a simple summer afternoon were now witnesses to the capture of a fugitive who had been living among them for months. Children who had been playing in the water were now learning that sometimes the scary monsters in stories were real people who lived in their own neighborhoods. Sarah, Karen said as Martinez opened the car door, will you tell Emma? Will you tell her that I never stopped thinking about her? That leaving her was the hardest thing I ever did? Martinez paused, her hand on Karen's head as she guided her into the back seat. I'll tell her we caught the woman who abandoned her and stole from our family. Beyond that, it's up to her if she ever wants to hear from you again. As the patrol car pulled away from the Willowbrew, 3 hours later, Detective Lisa Wong sat in the sterile interrogation room at the Willowbrook Police Department, Karen Morrison's designer handbag spread open on the metal table between them. What they'd discovered inside had transformed a simple fugitive capture into something far more sinister, a criminal enterprise that had been operating right under the community's nose. Karen sat across from her, no longer the perfectly coiffed suburban housewife who had terrorized the pool that afternoon. Her makeup had been washed away, revealing a woman who looked far older than her 46 years. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on her frame, and her hands shook slightly as she reached for the paper cup of lukewarm coffee Detective Wong had provided. Let's go through this one more time, Karen, Detective Wong said, her voice calm but relentless. We found 17 different credit cards in your purse, none of them in your real name. We found bank statements showing deposits totaling over $400,000 in the past 6 months alone. And we found this. She held up a small black notebook, its pages filled with Karen's meticulous handwriting. Names, addresses, social security numbers, bank account information, and detailed notes about the daily routines of dozens of Willowbrook residents. This isn't just identity theft, Detective Wong continued. This is a comprehensive criminal operation. You've been systematically targeting elderly residents, people with dementia, recent widows and widowers, the most vulnerable members of this community. Karen's composure, which had been slowly rebuilding since her arrest, crumbled once again. You don't understand, she whispered. I never meant to hurt anyone. It started as just a way to survive. Survive? Detective Wong's voice hardened. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson died 3 weeks ago, Karen. Died alone in a nursing home. Because you drained her accounts and she couldn't afford her medication. Tell me how that was about survival. The name hit Karen like a physical blow. Eleanor Patterson had been her first mark when she'd arrived in Willowbrook, a sweet 78-year-old widow with early-stage Alzheimer's who had befriended the charming new neighbor. Karen had started small, borrowing Eleanor's credit card for groceries, then gradually escalating to forging checks and accessing her retirement accounts. I didn't know she died, Karen stammered, tears beginning to flow again. I thought she was in a nice facility. I thought her family was taking care of her. Her family couldn't take care of her because you stole everything she had, Detective Wong replied coldly. Her son had to take out a second mortgage on his house just to pay for her final weeks in hospice care. Officer Martinez entered the room, carrying a thick folder of documents. The past 3 hours had been a whirlwind of phone calls, computer searches, and coordination with federal agencies. What they'd uncovered painted a picture of a criminal who had been far more successful and far more destructive than anyone had initially realized. We've identified at least 23 victims across 4 states, Martinez announced, setting the folder on the table. The FBI is calling it one of the most sophisticated elder fraud schemes they've seen. She wasn't just stealing money, she was systematically destroying lives. Karen looked up at her former sister-in-law, searching for any trace of the family, connection they'd once shared. Sarah, please, you have to believe me. I never wanted it to go this far. After I left Phoenix, I was desperate. I had gambling debts, People were threatening me. I just needed enough money to disappear completely. But you didn't disappear, Martinez said, her voice thick with disgust. You found something you were good at, manipulating vulnerable people, and you turned it into a career. Detective Wong opened the folder and spread several photographs across the table. They showed elderly residents of Willowbrook at various community events, the senior center's bingo night, the monthly potluck dinners, the gardening club meetings. In several of the photos, Karen could be seen in the background, always perfectly dressed, always smiling, always watching. You attended community events specifically to identify targets, Detective Wong continued. You volunteered at the Senior Eye Center. You joined the Neighborhood Watch. You made yourself indispensable to these people, and then you robbed them blind. It wasn't like that, Karen protested, but her voice lacked conviction. I genuinely cared about those people. I was lonely, and they became like family to me. Family? Martinez slammed her hand on the table, causing Karen to jump. You want to talk about family? Let me tell you about Emma, your daughter, who spent years in therapy trying to understand why her mother abandoned her, who still flinches when someone mentions Mother's Day, who changed her last name legally on her 18th birthday because she was so ashamed to be connected to you. The room fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Karen's face had gone completely white, and for a moment it looked like she might faint. Detective Wong consulted her notes. We found correspondence between you and a private investigator in Phoenix. You've been tracking Emma's life for years, haven't you? You know she got a full scholarship to Arizona State. You know she's studying social work specifically to help families affected by abandonment and addiction. You know she's engaged to a wonderful young man named Michael Torres. I just wanted to know she was okay, Karen whispered. I wanted to know she was happy. She is happy, Martinez said firmly. No thanks to you. She built a life despite you, not because of you. And now you want to waltz back in and destroy that peace she's found? Detective Wong leaned forward. Here's what I think really happened, Karen. I think you came to Willowbrook not just to hide, but because you'd exhausted your other hunting grounds. Phoenix got too hot when your brother-in-law started asking questions. California became problematic when the FBI got involved in that nursing home case. You needed fresh territory, new victims who didn't know your history. And you thought you'd found the perfect setup, Martinez added. A wealthy suburban community full of trusting retirees. You could live in luxury while systematically destroying the people who welcomed you with open arms. Karen's hands were shaking violently now. I was going to pay it all back, she said desperately. I was saving money to make restitution. I was going to turn myself in after I saw Emma one more time. Detective Wong pulled out a bank statement. Your offshore account in the Cayman Islands currently holds $1.7 million, Karen. Money stolen from 23 elderly victims across 4 states. When exactly were you planning to pay that back? The revelation hit Martinez like a thunderbolt. 17 million? Jesus Christ, Karen. Do you have any idea how many lives you've destroyed? It's not 17 million, Karen said quietly. It's 1.7 million, but there might be more. More? Detective Wong's voice was dangerously quiet. Karen looked down at her hands, unable to meet their eyes. There are other accounts, other identities. I've been doing this for 16 years. The interrogation room fell silent as the full scope of Karen's crimes began to sink in. This wasn't just about Willowbrook, or even the 4 states they'd identified. This was a criminal enterprise that had been operating for over a decade and a half, leaving a trail of devastation across the country. Martinez felt sick to her stomach. How much, Karen? How much money have you stolen over the years? I don't know exactly, Karen admitted, her voice barely audible. Maybe close to $8 million. Detective Wong closed her eyes and took a deep breath. $8 million stolen from vulnerable elderly victims. Dozens of families destroyed. Lives cut short because people couldn't afford medical care or proper housing after Karen had cleaned out their accounts. We need a full confession, Detective Wong said finally. Every victim, every alias, every bank account. The FBI is going to want to interview you, and so are police departments in at least 6 different states. And Emma? Karen asked, looking directly at Martinez for the first time in hours. What happens with Emma? Martinez stood up, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor. Emma doesn't know you're alive. As far as she's concerned, her mother died 16 years ago. That's probably the kindest thing you ever did for her, letting her believe you were dead rather than just selfish and criminal. But I want to see her. I want to explain. You want to explain that her mother is a career criminal who has spent the last 16 years stealing from grandparents and great-grandparents across the country? Martinez's voice rose. You want to explain that while she was growing up without a mother, you were living in luxury off the life savings of vulnerable elderly people? Karen began sobbing again, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to become this person. But you did become this person, Detective Wong said, gathering up the evidence spread across the table. You became someone who could look a lonely widow in the eye, gain her trust, and then steal everything she had. You became someone who could sleep at night knowing that your actions were literally killing people. As they prepared to move Karen to a holding cell to await federal charges, she looked up one last time at Martinez. Will you tell her something? For me? Will you tell Emma that I'm sorry? That I never stopped loving her? Even though I know I have no right to ask for her forgiveness? Marty,